Ambassador Pavlovsky, welcome to 7:30.
Good day.
Ambassador, you're here in Australia enjoying the benefits of a free and open society. How do you live with yourself representing the repressive, dictatorial Putin regime? You find that funny?
What I find funny is your way to start an interview.
Pretty straight question.
Yes, too straight. So let me tell you, first of all, that I never had problems living in my country. I had lived there for 13 years after my previous appointment, before I came to Australia. I never had an impression that I lived in an authoritarian, how did you put it?
Repressive and dictatorial were the words I used. Perhaps I should just give you some more ideas of what I have in mind when I say that. This is a regime that invaded its neighbour. It's a regime where protests are suppressed, where your free media is muzzled, where dissenters are murdered or imprisoned, where the extent of your war casualties are hidden from the public. How would you describe this form of government, if not a dictatorship?
Sarah, actually, I don't think that we have to involve in discussing our form of government with you. Actually, I was preparing myself for substantial questions on Russia's policy and Russia's position on certain issues, Russia's role in the world.
Yes, and indeed, those questions will come. I think for the audience, it's important for them to understand who you are and who you are representing in Australia. But let's move on to the matter of Ukraine.
Please.
You were happy to dispense with diplomatic language when you accused Australians of being, quote, brainwashed into supporting Ukraine. Now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was a criminal action, and the Russian military has terrorised the people of Ukraine. Do you understand you don't have to be brainwashed to understand that?
What was indeed a criminal action, a brutal invasion of a sovereign country, an illegal and immoral aggression, was in fact what happened 20 years ago, around March.
So we're talking about the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, just over 1 year ago.
I'm talking about having, when we are talking about the public being brainwashed, it involves not being able to see events in a context, and especially in the context of national history.
Well, let's just stay with.
Can I finish?
You can inject some context into this later, because I feel like a 20-year history may take too long. We've got something concrete to go on. Today's UN report details wide-ranging war crimes in Ukraine committed by the Russian army. These are torture, rape, the execution of prisoners, the deportation of more than 1,000 Ukrainian children to Russia, and the indiscriminate shelling of civilian infrastructure. Now, the International Criminal Court says it may amount to war crimes. How can you claim that this is a war to liberate Ukraine, which I think is the argument you were about to make?
Let me first ask you, the reports or documents you are referring to, do they say anything about war crimes committed by the Ukrainian side?
This is a report of war crimes committed by the Russian army in Ukraine, for which there is wide-ranging, vast amounts of evidence already available to the public of shocking accounts of what took place in Ukraine. The International Criminal Court is opening 2 war crimes investigations. Let me ask you this: will you cooperate with these investigations into alleged war crimes and indeed crimes against humanity in Ukraine?
Sarah, first of all, I would like to see these reports. From what I have seen so far, I gather that the bodies you are referring to are more than biased. They have a tunnel vision. They choose not to notice the ample evidence of the war crimes committed by the Ukrainian side. So my point is that any investigation should be unbiased.
Russia has caused the death of more than 8,000 Ukrainian civilians since February 2022. But in his speech to the Russian Federation last month, your president, President Putin, said, "We are not at war with the Ukrainian people." My question to you is, then why are you killing them?
First of all, let me address what you said about evidence again. That's why I'm saying that the public is brainwashed, because it hears loud words about evidence, about footage, about anything. But they never have the opportunity to fact-check what they are presented.
I'm not accepting that assertion, but let's go back to back to what President Putin.
No, Sarah, you don't have to record every time that you disagree with me. You invited me to hear my opinion.
Absolutely.
On that.
So I wanted to ask your opinion about this. I'll put it to you again. Russia's caused the death of more than 8,000 Ukrainian civilians since February 2022. But in his speech to the Russian Federation last month, President Putin said, "We are not at war with the people of Ukraine." My question was, then why are you killing them?
I would say that this tragedy of Ukraine started when the West sponsored a coup in Kiev and brought to power ultra-nationalistic, xenophobic government. And that was the government that, in fact, burned alive 50+ people in Odessa. Can I finish?
Well, actually, if you're just going to repeat Russian propaganda tropes from the past, I'll ask you to move on.
Sarah,
You're not going to answer that question.
I'm
going
listening
to
you
on.
repeating the Western propaganda, and it's okay.
Let's move on. Your own troops in Ukraine have called the battlefield a meat grinder. How many hundreds of thousands more casualties can Russia sustain without a public revolt?
I disagree with that. I don't see any signs of this.
There's no weakening of support for the war.
I don't see. Look, we are talking about special military operation.
It's a war, sir.
And
it's a war.
Please, you can call it whatever you can.
Yes.
Frankly, I think it has turned into war. I mean, a proxy war of NATO against Russia. That's what we witness, in fact.
Let's talk about the Australian involvement in this, because it is unusually large for a small country a long way away from Europe. Australia's given military equipment, including 90 Bushmasters, to Ukraine. Has Moscow asked you to lobby Canberra against the supply of equipment and money to Zelensky's government?
Look, it's not a matter of lobbying. Australian government knows our position, and the position is that the formula is very straightforward. The more you give weapons to Ukraine, the longer this war is protracted, the more are the casualties and destructions of Ukraine.
Now, your ally, Russia's ally, Xi Jinping, will travel to Russia shortly. His peace plan states that sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of all countries must be upheld. That would mean Russia pulling back to pre-invasion positions. Would Russia accept that in order to enable peace talks to take place?
First of all, Sarah, China is not an ally. You should have done your homework. Neither Russia nor China describe their relations as an alliance. If we are talking about the peace plan presented recently by China, our official position has been expressed. It's an important document. Our government's position is that any peace should take into consideration, peace deal, peace negotiation, has to take into consideration the realities on the ground. And these realities I hope you know, are that 4 new regions recently have joined Russia.
In breach of Ukrainian sovereignty. Let's move on. Your president has long claimed that Ukrainians and Russians are one people. Is the ultimate aim of this war the subjugation of the entire country?
Before we move on, let me react to your remark about sovereignty. That's a very important point. Sovereignty matters, but we cannot consider Ukraine on the eve of a Russian special military operation
War.
as a okay, you don't have to repeat that.
I think I do.
Really?
Yes.
So we cannot consider Ukraine on the eve of the Russian special military operation a sovereign country because in a sovereign country, the government thinks about the interests of its people.
It's not the definition of sovereign. I think you're accepting.
Okay, so
I think you're accepting there that you breached Ukraine's sovereignty,
So
which is the position of the United Nations and international law. That's what you.
So you say that sovereignty can include dismissing interests of own people, probably, but it definitely does not include to be guided by the interests of foreign countries.
It seems we are a long way from finding a resolution. Dr. Alexey Pavlovsky, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.